We now want to turn our attention to the NFL's current crisis and discuss it in roundtable fashion by bringing back our Bernie Goldberg, who has filed several Real Sports reports on the NFL's problems with concussions, our Andrea Kramer, who has specialized in reporting on the NFL throughout her career. We're also joined by Frank DeFord, who's been writing about the league and its people since the 70s, which is when I started hosting the NFL for NBC, and our John Frankel, who has the latest turn on where this crisis is heading. John, start us off. What have you got?
We recently spoke to a woman named Chelsea Oliver, and she believes that these two issues that are haunting the NFL right now, head trauma and domestic abuse, collided in her personal life. She was married to a guy named Paul Oliver who played safety in the NFL for 5 years. She says this was a loving husband, a great father, with no history of domestic violence or abuse, and then he suffered 3 major concussions, and his behavior changed drastically. Take a listen.
It went from him, grabbing me or walking by me and pushing me to pulling my hair. There was once where he dragged me up and down the stairs, kicked me, would throw me against the wall.
Did you feel your life was in jeopardy?
Not at the beginning. As time went on, I started thinking about that, yes. I was just in such a mode where it's like trying to protect my family from this monster that was not my husband.
Sadly, it's been about a year since Paul Oliver took his own life. And Chelsea believes wholeheartedly that this is a result of the head trauma that he suffered playing the game of football. And his brain was studied, and it turned out that he did have CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is a disease brought on by head trauma.
Bernie, can I assume this link doesn't surprise you? You've been all over the concussions front.
Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me. A certain percentage of players, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, in this case, fewer years than that, are going to suffer brain damage, serious brain damage, whether it's dementia, depression, even Alzheimer's, things like that. And every now and then it results in something as tragic as what John described.
It's interesting, the linkage of the two, because Americans, it did not seem, were not moved when it was brought to light that 1 in 3 players will suffer some kind of brain damage. But they were moved by the treatment of a few women.
Exactly.
Why?
Well, the conversation I think has moved, if I may for a minute, is that what we've learned about head trauma is we were saying, okay, now these players know what they're getting into. Eyes wide open, right? They've been told that this game can hurt you. Now they're not just hurting themselves, but there is the potential, if the connection can really be made, that they're hurting their loved ones.
Why did the women's issue resonate, but the head trauma didn't, Andrea?
Well, I think even if you look at the issue of domestic violence, 30 cases have been identified in the NFL over the past 5 years by a USA Today database. They're the only ones that are keeping this number. And yet, where has a policy been to this point? Why did Javon Belcher commit the ultimate act of domestic violence, killing the mother of his child and then killing himself?
Right.
That didn't resonate the way that it has now when TMZ releases a video and all heck breaks loose around.
Was it simply the visual? Is that what it took to
what
move
do people
Americans?
think domestic violence looks like?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
That to me is
Which
the
was
key.
always the question for Goodell. Did he think she fainted?
Right.
I mean, when she was being pulled off the elevator?
What do you think it looks like? Domestic violence isn't a tea party, and the idea that people are seeing it for the first time they found to be so abhorrent. This is what it looks like. And if there's any silver lining to be brought out, and it's very hard to find one, maybe finally and look, domestic violence is a problem in the entire country.
Right.
It's not,
and
it's definitely resonated more because of what's happened in the league. But this is a huge issue.
Frank, Goodell has been the lightning rod for all this. Didn't help himself with his press conference the other day. I know you've talked about it on NPR. His credibility, his authority, gone for good?
I think his moral suasion is absolutely evaporated. I think he's a ghost now. I don't know when he'll leave, but I don't think he can continue to have any kind of real credibility. I think what the league needs is somebody from outside. You remember Goodell grew up in the league. He's a lifer. He only sees it from a football point of view. I think.
You're telling me it's hard for him to act decisively with people who he's been looking up to for so long?
Football, and I'm talking about all of football, needs kind of a steward. And the head of the NFL is the obvious person to be that. We're not just talking about the NFL here. We're talking about college football. We're talking about peewee football, and all the damages that can come to young people as well. And we need somebody from outside to come in and be that person.
Let me throw out another possibility. I think we've got the shortest attention span in our nation's history. I think things have a half-life of 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes.
Which is why I'm stunned that the outrage has lasted this long, frankly.
Let's see if it lasts into next week or the week after. The Russians or their pals in Ukraine shoot down a civilian airliner with innocent passengers on board, and the story fades away if not in the blink of an eye, something close to it. I think this story is very big now. I'm not sure how long it's going to be very big, and I'm not sure how long people are going to care about Roger Goodell's moral authority.
Well, I said to Frank before that Goodell, in a sense, is sort of the scapegoat here. Would any commissioner, who's running this league right now, have done anything different? Because they're answering to the 32 owners, and they are protecting a $10 billion business.
And if he were fired, nothing would change.
No. It's the culture of the game. It's the owners.
I think if he was fired and the right person replaced him, then someone who didn't appear to be beholden to the owners and beholden to the glory of football, someone who could look at the whole picture, I think it could begin to change. I think football needs that, as a matter of fact.
John just mentioned the word culture. This whole idea of changing the culture, we have heard this, it's become a cliche in the National Football League. Let me just throw this out to you. I spoke to some current and some former female employees of the NFL, and one thing stood out for me that a woman said. She said the culture of the NFL when it comes to women is paternalistic at best, misogynistic at worst. You want to start changing the culture, need to have some women who actually have a voice. I know the NFL's just hired a number of women consultants, but I will say that when that initial decision was made for the 2-game suspension for Ray Rice, and you had Adolfo Birch, and you had Jeff Pash, and you had Roger Goodell, where was a woman who could be heard?
Janae was heard. Nobody wants to talk about this part of it. Look, I understand the complications, at least I think I understand the complications of domestic violence and the cycle of violence and how victims think. I think I understand that. But Roger Goodell, and I'm not standing up for the commissioner of the NFL, Roger Goodell has the two of them in a room. He should have had them in two separate rooms,
yes,
but he has the two of them in a room, and she's pleading his case. She's saying, whatever she said, she's pleading his case. But you're not allowed to say anything about Janae because then you're not showing enough empathy for the victim. Well, I have empathy for a woman who gets knocked out by her fiancé, but Roger Goodell, it wasn't as if she went in there and said, hey, this guy beat me up and you ought to do something about it. And he said, how about 2 games? She was in there defending Ray Rice.
Let me just throw out one number. A Marist poll found that 86% of people said their viewing habits, their appreciation of the NFL hasn't changed.
Absolutely no surprise.
Not surprising any of you?
Football players are fungible. It's their own fault. They're making a lot of money. If they get hurt, somebody else will replace them, and our Sunday games will still be on.
The New York Times, in a big story on this, says that football fans are struggling to reconcile their love of the game with what's going on. I don't believe that for a second.
They're not struggling at all.
They're not struggling at all.
Last question. A year from now, is the NFL fully recovered?
I think so.
Andrew?
I think like what Bernie said, short attention spans.
Frank?
Football is in trouble, not the NFL.
John?
I don't think anything significant changes.
All right.
All right, guys. Thank you all so very much.